We are on. Welcome everybody back to the Living Parsha. We had a bit of a break for Pesach, which was a beautiful break, I hope. Um, and our minds were on other things, on Pesach and the Seder. But now we're back to the weekly Parsha. Last Shabbos, actually, since it was Pesach, we didn't have a Parsha. And so this Parsha of Shemini, which is this week's Torah reading, is our second week of studying it. So if you study the weekly Parsha, we have a double opportunity to study it because the whole week of Parsha we were doing last week is now done again since Shabbat was the seventh day of Pesach. So to go through the Parsha and Shemini to have one of
Sorry,
the Chumashim.
I'm sorry, Rabbi. Just to clarify, because I was confused about this. Was there? Are you saying that there was actually no parsha during
So
Pesach?
how yeah. So how this is a good question. Sorry, I wasn't so clear. When it comes to a chag, to a holiday, we read a special reading for the festival. So on Pesach, the first 2 days of Pesach and the last 2 days, so day 1 and 2, day 7 and 8 are chagim, are festivals. Actually, every day of Pesach, we have a special Torah reading related to the theme of the holiday. So we read about on the seventh day of Pesach, which was Shabbat, this past Saturday, we read about the Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea, since that happened on the seventh day. So the 21st of Nisan, which was this past Shabbat, or was the splitting of the sea, we read that portion on Shabbat morning.
Oh.
And so we took a break from the weekly portion to read a thematic parsha, and now we return back to the weekly portion. So we go back to where we're up to, which is Shemini. So
Oh, I thought you
essentially,
doubled up. Okay, so you literally did just stop reading
whenever
Leviticus.
a festival
Okay.
comes, we stop reading Leviticus, whatever we're doing, we go
Ah,
to a festival reading. Yeah, doesn't always coincide with Shabbat, so sometimes you don't miss a Shabbat. But when a festival's on Shabbat, it supersedes, it overrides the weekly Shabbat parsha, and then we return to the Shabbat cycle the next week.
You're going to keep
And the
talking.
festival reading was from Torah. I mean, we read it at
Yeah,
our temple. It's just out of sequence. That's all.
exactly. It's not from the regular cycle of Torah reading. It's
I
just
hear you more in this class than I hear the rabbi.
sorry. Okay. So so back to Shemini. So the parsha begins. The Shemini means eight, and it's a follow up from last week's Torah reading where we had the 7 days of inauguration, where the temple is being inaugurated through Moses and Aaron. The 7 days it's built and all the offerings are offered, and the eighth day is the big opening day of the season. And we read of Aaron performing the rituals for the first time as a high priest to formally inaugurate the temple. And he goes through his motions, God's presence dwells there, and then tragedy strikes. Two of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, offer a foreign fire, and maybe we'll speak soon what that means. And the fire consumes them, and they die in the temple while the entire Jewish nation is celebrating with Aaron the inauguration of the Mishkan. This is, of course, a shock to everybody and a real tragedy. And Aaron does not offer much in response. Vayidam Aaron is silent. And it's considered a positive. It's not silent out of a lack of empathy or feelings for his children, but he recognized that he didn't complain to God. Like, it wasn't like, this is so unfair. Why is this? He sort of accepted in that moment. And interestingly, usually when someone faces a tragedy of the death in the family, we have period of mourning. And during that period of mourning, you're not meant to follow the regular rituals of mitzvah. Until a person is buried, you actually don't have any mitzvah. You're not meant to pray. You're not meant to uh, do any rituals. And even once they are buried for Shiva, the 7 day mourning period, you stay at home and you keep to yourself. But because of the context where we're in the middle of the inauguration, in historic moment, God tells Aaron, we're suspending the mourning until this is over. And for now, you continue on as usual. Do not practice. Don't tear your clothing. Don't go through mourning practices. We're in the middle of something here that is historic and has to be continued. And Aaron, to his credit, follows through, finishes the inauguration for the Jewish people, and puts aside his own personal mourning and sacrifice and what he went through. And so this is a very, a very enigmatic story, why they die, and the circumstances surrounding it are very vague, which leads to so many reasons given. Someone recently told me they did one thing wrong, and the rabbis are putting hundreds of things on them because there's so many different opinions about what they messed up and why they were deserving his death. So that's the first half of the parsha. The second half of the parsha takes us on a much more mundane journey through the laws of kosher. And this is a lot more probably, relevant today. It's not so much storyline, but practice. And we have the laws governing kosher animals, which animals are kosher, to determine the kosher animal that has split hooves and choose its cut. It's the two signs of a kosher animal. It has to have both of those signs. There are some animals have one, and those are listed in Torah. For example, a pig, which has the split hooves, doesn't chew its cud. There are others that chew their cud, don't have split hooves. And that's for animals. For fish, the signs are fins and scales. Any fish that has fins and scales is kosher. If it only has one or neither, it's not. For birds, we're not given exact signs, rather a list of birds that are not kosher and those that are kosher, which complicates things because the biblical terms used aren't the same terms used today. So we have to know what these birds the Torah mentions are referring to. And for the most part, we rely on tradition that these birds are passed down in tradition, are part of the kosher list, which creates really controversy when it comes to sort of birds of the New World. For example, turkey. Um, just to answer a question in the chat, the second sign of a kosher animal is chews its cud. It regurgitates its food a few times. The way it has a multiple stomachs and it eats the food and brings it back up and chews it again until it finally breaks it down. So turkey is an interesting one because it's a bird of the New World. Uh, in fact, in Israel they call it, I think they call it like hodu, right? And in some places they call it, it's an American bird. It's a European bird. There was no long-standing tradition as a kosher animal until today. There are Jewish communities or individuals that don't eat turkey for this reason. And many families have a tradition not to eat turkey. Some do, and how it got on the list is a discussion for itself. But that's just an example where there's no. When it comes to animals and fish, we have criteria, which we can make a call and a judgment call for ourselves. When it comes to birds, it's a list, and that gets more complicated. Yes, Rita.
I have two questions. One is where are they now? Where is Moses?
Moses and Aaron during which moment?
For this Parsha, where are they?
So in the desert.
You mean where are the Israelites?
Yeah,
The whole group.
Yeah, so we're in the desert, camped in the desert, and building a Mishkan for God.
all right. And the other thing is, I'm not quite sure the difference between the terms Mishkan, tabernacle, and temple.
Okay, good question. So we'll define those terms a little because they come up a lot in these parshas. So temple means, as it's a simple English word. Temple refers to a house of worship, specifically a house of worship for God. And so a temple can refer to the temple in Jerusalem, which in Hebrew is called a Beit HaMikdash. Could also refer to a temple that pre-existed, predated the temple in Jerusalem. For example, the portable temple the Jews had in the desert. In Hebrew, the term we use for that portable temple is Mishkan. Mishkan literally means a place of dwelling, where God's presence was manifest, a place of presence. And that was a portable structure, which we dealt with a lot in the earlier parshas. The Jews would collapse, take on their travels with them, and rebuild each time they camped in the desert. They took it into Israel, and they rebuilt it in Israel, and then rebuilt a more extensive Mishkan in Israel, until finally 400 years later, after entering Israel, they built a temple, the permanent structure. And the big difference was the Mishkan was made out of wooden poles or beams and material, whereas the Beit HaMikdash, the final home for God, was built out of stone, more permanent. So
And
both can get rid of
tabernacle.
temple.
And then where is the tabernacle in
Yeah,
this?
so tabernacle is often the translation used for Mishkan.
Okay.
I don't know what the word means. One of those English words I don't like using because to me it's as Hebrew as I amazed with the Hebrew word.
Because and sometimes people refer to, I've heard Sukkot referred to as the Feast of the Tabernacles.
Exactly. That's the tabernacle means some sort of hot temporary structure.
The
But
hut.
it's like calling tefillin phylacteries, which is like the English translation. You may as well say tefillin. Like no one knows what it is anyways. That to me it's no more English, no more translation than the Hebrew term.
And is Greek and is temple a Greek word?
I don't know. I don't know the roots of temple. I'm going to guess
Okay.
it comes from Latin or Greek. We'll have to look
But
it up,
it's not
etymology.
but it's not Hebrew.
No, temple is a translation.
Okay.
Yeah. Interestingly, in contemporary terms, some people refer to synagogues as temples. And that began with the early reform movements who kind of wanted to get away from the position where we're in exile and hoping to build a temple in Jerusalem. And they wanted to move away from that narrative and say, no, we're here. We're not looking to leave our place. We're comfortable in the world we're in. So they renamed the synagogues temples. We have a temple, but we are still waiting for a temple that will be the third temple in Jerusalem. So I don't know the etymology of the word, but it's an English term. That's yeah. So I want to look at that's the overview of Parsha in a nutshell. I want to look at the first story, but in particular, focus on one element contrast between Aaron and his sons. Aaron and his children that was present on that first day of inauguration. And
Interrupt, you're referring to the two sons that died or all of
yes,
his
the two
children?
sons that
Just the two
died.
that died.
Yeah. The other two we don't hear much about in this story, so they survive. They would just do what they had to do. Um, but before I get there, I'll start off with the very beginning, the name of the parsha, the eighth day. And I was thinking about this. It's a strange way to refer to day number one. Take, for example, baseball, right? We're in the baseball season, and opening day of baseball is the first game. There's been a preseason, so there's been some warm-up games. They don't count for the tally of the season. Game one, right? The opening day is the first game of the season. We don't say, well, since there's been, I don't know, 5 or 6 preseason games, we're starting now game seven. It's not how it works, right? So there's been 7 days of preparation, of build-up, of practice, and now it's opening day of the Mishkan. This should be day number one. It happens to be it was the first day of the first month, first of Nisan on the calendar. See, this is a new beginning, a new opening of history. The Jews had a place to worship God, which we've spoken about, was kind of recreating the Sinaitic moment. We're recreating our revelation at Sinai in a permanent way. This is the beginning of something new. And Torah goes out of its way to call it the eighth day. Yom HaShmini, that's the name of the parsha, right? The eighth day. So it wasn't even Aaron's eighth day on the job. The first 7 days, Moses led the charge. He was the position of the high priest, and Aaron was kind of his understudy. And then this eighth day, the first day of the proper temple, proper Mishkan, Aaron began his job. So it really was the first day. Why would Torah refer to it as the eighth day? Trying to sort of hint at something that we're continuing something. It's not something new, it's building on the seven. What's going on there? Any suggestions?
Just like we're building to the third temple, all that we do before the eighth day that we're referring to now is part of the process. And I assume 8 has something to do with the Kabbalistic 7, like 50 has to do with 49. I'm guessing 8 has something to do with 7.
Okay. So the symbolism in the number 8, coming on top of 7, that is true.
And the fact that the prior 7 days is not a warm up, it is part of the process.
Okay. Another very, very good point. It's important to remember that the warm up is not just a warm up, it's part of the process. which I think is a very beautiful idea in general. Often we look at, the results. We're looking for results, and the pathway to get there is sort of an inconvenient, necessary step. But we just want results, and realizing that the process is itself valuable. The process is part of the result, is a very important thing. And to realize the struggle we had to get somewhere was as valuable as where we got, right? So the 7 days of practice are not left behind as irrelevant. We only have this first day because it's the eighth day. So paying homage to the 7 days of practice, we call this the eighth day. That's a nice, definitely one way of looking at it. Yeah. Anyone else? So there's a few interpretations. Actually, this year I heard a new interpretation I'll share from by Jonathan Sachs. I think it's very beautiful. And it's going to tie into what I want to say as well. So I think it's very relevant. He says the part of the story here is fire, right? The fire that consumed Aaron's sons. And the very first time we encounter fire in Torah is Saturday night, the first Saturday night of creation, where Adam was banished from the Garden of Eden. And the world is getting dark for the first time. And he gets afraid. The Midrash says, Adam, maybe the world's coming to an end. He doesn't know what's happening. Suddenly it's getting dark. And so he finds two stones and he lights a fire and he says, oh, it's okay, there's hope, there's fire. And that happens after the 7 days of creation, which is why every single week after Shabbat, when we make Havdalah, we light a fire, make a blessing on this fire, thank God who created fire. Because we recreate that moment where Adam did the fire. And so Ray Sachs says something very interesting. 7 is days of creation, it's God's work. God built the world, God created this world. The eighth day was Adam's contribution. He found fire, discovered something, used his creativity, ingenuity. Of course, he didn't create something new. God put the potential of a fire and sparks into these stones. He built it as part of the sort of algorithm. But it was Adam's own creativity and ingenuity that led him to engineer this first flame. And so the eighth day, he says, is harkening us back to the eighth day of creation. The first Sunday, Saturday night and Sunday, wasn't day one of the next week. It was day 8. It was Adam building on God's world he created. And this is a fascinating concept, and it's highlighted in Judaism specifically, that our role as humans is not just to submit to God. We're co-creators. We're called upon to fix the imperfect world, to heal the world. And so our role in this world is to use our own talents, our own efforts to create things and to build and to innovate and to bring God's calling further than it has been or could be without us. And that was the entire purpose of the Mishkan, right? God came down to Sinai. That was sort of God doing his thing, presenting himself to the Jewish people. Building a Mishkan was the Jewish people using their best efforts in creating a temple, using their resources, using their own efforts to create a space for God. And so what they were doing essentially was creating that 8, recreating what Adam did that very first 8th day. So it's just an interesting way to look at it, where we look at days of the week, 1, 7, then we restart a new cycle. While that is true, there's also a way of looking at our first day is really 8. It's building on what God did. We're not just redoing the world, the cycle that God created, we're adding something extra to the world. And that's an incredibly empowering idea, that our own efforts are actually innovating. And God wants us to use our best talents, our best ideas to bring the world to places that it wasn't yet and couldn't be without us. And that's essentially what the Mishkan was. It was the Jewish people, obviously commanded by God, directed by God, with the instructions how to build this Mishkan. But the instructions were, I want you to make a temple. You create a home, use your resources. And that's the only way that God can be housed in a permanent way. When it comes from God, then it's like he's here, then he's not. When we create the space, when we use our own resources, then we are creating something more permanent. It's something part of our society, part of our community, and then we're sort of housing it, then it's going to remain here. And so that was
Next
the
question.
purpose. Yeah, sure.
To that point, in the idea that we're co-creators, of at least our world with God, are we creators or are we vessels? It seems sacrilegious to say that we create along with God.
I would say we are creators, and I think from the Jewish perspective, it's not sacrilegious at all. It's the height of religiosity. Um, and there's reference in the Midrash and Talmud to this expression, we partner with God in creation. And I think obviously our ability to be co-creators is because we are created in divine image. So it's because we have sort of the God spark in us that allows us to be partners. But I think that is exactly the divine image that human beings have. That God created a world. It's impossible for a created being to create, right? You program a computer program, even AI is not really creating anything. It's using knowledge and just spitting out things from everything it's learned. Um, and the ability that we can actually create a new reality, and we can be obviously using materials God gave us, but with those materials, really creating something new. That is the divine image that we were endowed by God, and that is something incredibly empowering. That yes, we do shift reality, and without us, it wouldn't be there. With us, it's there. And our mitzvahs, our observance of Shabbat, specifically called the partner with God in creation. So there's definitely something we do as human beings that we are co-creators. Yeah.
But I was going to say since there is nothing outside of God, and God didn't need us to create a perfect world, but He looked to us to be partners in that process. And to your point about AI, are we really creating or are we discovering more truths?
So it's a good question. It's a large discussion for itself. I don't want to get so sidetracked with it. I
Okay.
would say two things. Number one, that yes, there's a point there that kind of we're not outside of God, and only because we have divine image and the potential was put there. So there's definitely but there is also this paradox that kind of the purpose to creation is to create a world that God couldn't create on His own. God needs human beings.
Could not,
Could
or
not,
chose not to.
could not have. And if He could have, He would have, right? There's a certain element that God create anything He wants. The one thing God can't create is a human being who has the choice to do good or bad, make good choices, because God has no choice. So the sort of the ability for creative being doesn't recognize God and lives in a foreign world to discover God, that's something God can't do. Only the creative being can do. And so there's an element of our purpose in this world that we are doing something God needs us for. Obviously, He chose to meet us, so it's not an essential need, not a lacking in God, but there is something which He chose to need, and that is something we fulfill uniquely. But I don't want to get too sidetracked with the
Understood.
philosophical argument there. Um, so that's just an interesting, the eight. Why eight? Another reason, perhaps, why the eight is a very special number in Judaism, and Greg alluded to this before. For the most part, seven comes up a lot in our cycles of time. 7 days of the week, 7 weeks. So 7 weeks now from Passover to Shavuot. 7 years is a Shemitah cycle. 7 Shemitah cycles is a Jubilee, the Yovel cycle. There are seven, music notes, 7 colors in the rainbow, the
Mhm.
spectrum. So the vision of seven is this like nature. We divide
Don't
into
forget the
these
seven
sevens,
dwarfs. Don't forget the seven dwarfs.
of course. And eight represents something that transcends the natural. Eight is this beyond
Right.
nature. We celebrate the miracle of Hanukkah. That's sort of the candles lit for beyond what was supposed to be. It's an 8 day holiday. Um, it says, a harp has 7 strings. So the 7 musical notes. So the Mashiach comes, there'll be a harp of 8 strings, a new musical note. What that means, I don't know. But there's an idea that eight is representative of transcending nature. And the Mishkan was all about that, was creating from our world transcendence, right? Finding a God that's beyond the world through using resources of the world, creating a space for God that's beyond the world. And so the eighth day wasn't just day number one, which could represent oneness of God. It was seven using all our resources and discovering eight, discovering something that's beyond everything we know. And so Torah wants to highlight that by referring to it specifically as the eighth day, not the first day of the beginning of the Mishkan. So these are all ideas that go hand in hand, but different reasons why the eighth day will be used as opposed to the first day. But there's something interesting. Moses was the one that served for 7 days as the high priest. Why wasn't he the high priest? You think about it. Moses was the leader of the Jewish people. He could have been the high priest as well in the temple. In fact, his brother was chosen. And we're told in the Midrash, in the Talmud, something very interesting, that originally Moses was supposed to be God's original sort of vision for the Jewish people. Moses was supposed to be the leader across the board. But when God originally approached Moses at the burning bush and says, I want you to go to Egypt to take the Jews out of slavery, Moses' initial reaction was, no, thank you. I'm not up to this job. I am not the person for this. I don't know how to speak well. Pharaoh would never
But
listen to me.
sorry to interrupt, but it wasn't no because I reject it. It's because I'm not qualified for it, and there's a difference.
Well, he did a few things. He did a few things. Not so simple. For if you want to go back to the verses there in the beginning of Shemot, it's actually the Talmud says it was a 7 day negotiation at the burning bush. So a week's negotiation between God and Moses at the burning bush. Different arguments Moses was proposing why he didn't want it, first of all, and then didn't feel ready for it or up for it. And finally, he said, even if I can, this isn't the end of the Jewish story. Send the person that's going to finish the story off, not for me. So he goes back and forth for 7 days. And the Talmud says, because Moses did not initially sort of bow to God's request, he lost the position of the high priest. Commentaries say, since it was a 7 day negotiation until he finally said yes, he got 7 days only of being the high priest. So the first 7 days of inauguration, he was the one leading the show, throwing the ropes, and then, sorry, Moses, you've lost this, goes to your brother Aaron.
Did he accept the job on the eighth day?
Well, the eighth day he did accept the job eventually. God coerced him into it. But God's final argument to coerce him into it was, don't worry, your brother Aaron will be there in Egypt to help you. So perhaps that's the sort of the significance of the eighth day where Moses finally agrees because Aaron will be there to help him. And so God says, no problem. The eighth day, Aaron will be the person, be the high priest. And you'll be the leader, the rabbi, the teacher, the prophet. So with that backstory in mind, I want to take you to the very first day of inauguration. Before the fire consumes Aaron's sons, we find something very, very significant. And this is in chapter 9, verse 7. It reads that Moses tells Aaron before this to go and offer his sacrifices for the first day. And then Moses says to Aaron, approach the altar and offer up your sin offering and your ascent offering, atoning for yourself and for the people, offer up the sacrifice. So he almost like pushes him, go, approach the altar and do this. And the Midrash and the Talmud pick up on this. They say Moses had to coerce Aaron into this. Aaron got cold feet. And Moses just go and do this job. It's for you. And the Talmud
And
says,
Moses
why?
and Moses had
Sorry.
cold feet when God approached him.
Well, not so much cold. Yeah, perhaps cold feet. But here it's more Aaron knew the stakes and had cold feet. Now that there's different opinions about why Aaron had cold feet here. Why in the last moment, they'd been preparing this for days. The last moment he kind of choked. Possibly just the enormity of the moment was overwhelmed him, right? He had millions of Jews looking on. They had worked on this project for months. This is going to be what God descends into the temple to be within the community. And Aaron's like, I can't do this, right? And the Midrash says an example of someone marrying the king and like someone who wasn't from royalty. In the last moment in the bridal chamber, It's just like, what am I getting into? Can I do this? Can I perform as I'm supposed to? So that's on a simple reading. But the Talmud adds depth to this. And it says the altar had in the corner of the altar, there were these little cones on each corner. So four little horns. And looked at from straight on, you see two horns, right? Because they're parallel. And the Talmud says, or the commentaries say, Aaron looked at the altar and he saw these horns, the image of the golden calf played in his eyes, in his head. And he said, I'm not worthy of this. What if God holds me still accountable for the golden calf? I messed up. I really, this is a terrible sin for the whole Jewish people. Can I really be the one now to represent the people in achieving atonement? And he felt, can't do this. So that imagery, sort of the trauma he had from the golden calf, hit him in that last moment, and he couldn't do this. And the response Moses gives Aaron is, go, because for this you were chosen. What does for this mean? So the simple reading is for this means for this job. You were chosen for this job. So don't have cold feet. Don't worry about, don't let anything, all your negative self-talk, put that aside. God chose you for this job. You have it in you. You can do it. That's a simple reading of the Talmud. For this you were chosen. But came across two interesting commentaries that say actually sort of opposing things about what it means for this. One commentary, very beautiful commentary on leadership, says, for this you were chosen. And Moses tells Aaron, you're having cold feet? You're not sure if you're up for the job? Perfect. For this, that's exactly why you were chosen for this job. Someone who has absolutely no qualms, I'm going to be the best leader. I know how to do this. I have all the answers.
Mm.
Whoa, 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 whoa. That's not, you don't want that person to be in a position of leadership. Someone who has the humility to be afraid of the position, respects the position so much that they're not sure if they are worthy of fulfilling it. That's the kind of leader we want. There's a story of one of the Chabad Rebbes once asked one of his Hasidim, his students, I want you to go to this town and be the shochet there, the ritual slaughterer in the certain town in Europe. And the person was very nervous. It's a big responsibility because the kosher of the whole town was reliant on your own. You have to check the knife, make sure the slaughter is done correctly. It's a very complicated process and procedure to slaughter an animal properly, make sure that it's kosher and fitting for everyone to eat. And he says, Rabbi, I'm afraid. I don't know if I'm worthy. He says, that's exactly. If I send someone who isn't afraid, I'm worried about them. But you, because you're afraid of this job, I trust you will have the care and concern to make sure it's kosher. And so Moses telling Aaron, you're so humble. Your humility is showing that you're nervous. Am I worthy of this? Lakach. Therefore, because of this, that's why you were chosen. And so don't be worried. Almost like embrace the fear. Be afraid of it and go ahead. Don't say, oh, I gotta push it aside the fear. I shouldn't have any fears. Or don't say because I'm afraid, therefore I can't do it. No, you're afraid of this position and sit with that. Sit with that humility. Allow yourself to be afraid, but do it anyways. Right? So don't negate the feeling, but realize that feeling is a healthy feeling. Feeling afraid of the task is healthy, but do it anyways. That's an incredible thing for our lives in general. Often we're not sure if we can do something, and we have this fear, imposter syndrome, or we have a kind of nervousness. Can I really do this? Be nervous. It's okay. It's actually normal to be nervous, but do it anyways. Right? Don't try to overcompensate. I shouldn't be nervous. I'm nervous and be cocky. Don't either allow the nerves to stop you from doing what's right. Allow yourself to be nervous and say it's healthy that I'm nervous about this. Should be. It's a big deal. Then go ahead and do it. And especially in positions of leadership, we want leaders who have the humility to be nervous about their job. And if only we had leaders in our politics of this, can you imagine what the campaign trail would look like if the presidential candidates were reflective? Am I really up for this job? I'm not sure. I'm worried about it. The debate would look very different, right?
Well, in the original sort of way it was in the beginning of the country, it was like gauche to run. You had to kind of say no a few times. To openly run was like that was not something you did the first few elections at all.
Oh, really? Okay, so yeah, that's exactly it. Anyone who wants to run, we should be suspect of. Um, so that's one beautiful teaching. There's another teaching that flips this on its head. And Moses was telling Aaron the exact opposite. If you remember, I said before that Moses was supposed to have the job, but because he had cold feet, because he wasn't sure he could do it, he lost the job. So now he sees Aaron having cold feet. He says, Aaron, you have to understand. The whole reason you have this job is because I had cold feet. Don't you have cold feet now? Like, don't do this. You lose your job. So he tells him, Aaron, you have cold feet. No, that's why you were the one chosen, because you have the confidence in yourself and your ability to do what God wants from you. You don't ask questions, and God puts you for a task. That's why you were chosen. So don't change your attitude now. I have this issue. Moses says, I have this, I wasn't so gung-ho about doing what God wanted. You don't have that issue. So because of this, you were chosen, because of this, because of your ability to have confidence in yourself when God needs you to, that's how you were chosen for this job. Strap your shoes on and get going. Pull your socks up. Let's go. So he was encouraging Aaron, you're not meant to have cold feet. It's not your personality. It's not you. You're a person who takes leadership seriously, and you know when you're called for a task, you go. So get back into that zone.
So in this version of it, why did Aaron say no? If he's so confident, or he's confident and believes in the mission, why did he say no though?
Well, he still had that trauma of the golden calf was very strong, right?
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
and in fact, there's another beautiful teaching from the Kabbalah that says something very beautiful. Aaron was worried that I sinned the golden calf. I can't be the one to represent the people now in the temple. And Moses tells him, no, precisely because of that you were chosen. Each of us have a mission in life. Every single human being has something we uniquely are here to achieve in this world. And it's hard to know what my mission is. What's my job? So how am I supposed to be my best self? What should I work on? What should I highlight? What part of what can I contribute to the world? Right? It's impossible to know. So we've got to do everything just in case. We've got to be a little bit of everything and hope that one of it is achieving my personal purpose. But this particular teaching says something beautiful. It says, wherever you find particular struggle, wherever you find a sort of a power within that's holding you back from something, that is what your purpose is destined to be, which is why there's a force holding you back from it, which is why you struggle with it. If you find a particular mitzvah very difficult, that's because that's supposed to be your mitzvah. And
Why does it work that way? Why does it work that way?
because, great question. Because we have this yin and yang. We have this within us two souls. We have the soul that wants to do the right thing, and then the God made it that we have free choice. He wanted us to struggle in order to build character or in order to make us make good choices. And so there's this power in the world which is holding us back from achieving our best things. And the more tension against, right? That's like a rope. The more the tension is, the stronger the pull's going to be. Wherever you have more tension is where you have a stronger affinity to. And so there's something blocking you there. And so Moses was telling Aaron, you're worried that you're not up for this task because you failed. You came to the golden calf. That's because you are meant for this job, which is why it was so difficult for you, the golden calf. You failed there, okay. Don't give up. Get stronger. And so if you fail in a certain area, it shouldn't be a reason to give up. It's a reason to double down and try again and work even harder in that particular area.
But how
So
how do
Moses
you
telling Aaron,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no,
No,
yeah, Jordan.
how do you reconcile that sort of sense of forgiveness and do better this time with what happens to his sons?
Well,
Why don't they get the chance to do better?
great question. Great question. So I want to get to that. Contrast Aaron. This is all, Aaron. There's different positions reflecting what Aaron was going through. Yeah, great question. And we're gonna segue into Aaron's son. So Aaron has his struggle, and this is perfect, segue. And he's given a second chance. What happens to his sons? So it's on this first day of inauguration, and Aaron does his job, and his sons go into the Holy of Holies, and they offer it. It's described by Torah as a foreign fire, and they're consumed by this fire, and they die. What do they do wrong? And there's
Yeah.
a lot of different answers given, each one with kind of a close reading of the text in a different way. So one answer is they were actually intoxicated. They were drunk. And you're not allowed to serve the temple drunk. Why do we think they were drunk? Because the very next thing God tells Aaron after his children die is a law, you're not allowed to serve in the temple when you're intoxicated. And so the commentaries say, why is God telling Aaron this law right now? Obviously, that's what happens. And so God's telling him, they messed up. Remember for the future, no one should serve intoxicated. Okay. Some say that they took initiative when they weren't supposed to. And so at this moment of inauguration, everything was set. There was a schedule, there was a predetermined service of worship, and they took their own initiative. They went to the Holy of Holies when no one's supposed to go to the Holy of Holies besides the high priest on Yom Kippur. There's a midrash that says they were actually kind of plotting to take over leadership, and sort of when their father and uncle will die, we can be the new leaders. And so they were kind of pushing their way to the top where they didn't belong. So there's a lot of different ways to look at what they did. But I think there's a more positive approach that is presented by the Or HaChaim, by Chaim Ibn Attar, a wonderful commentary on Torah. And he says they had the best intentions in mind. They were so overwhelmed by the moment, the experience, the spiritual experience of that first day where God's presence rested there. And they couldn't hold themselves back, and they just continued that spiritual journey to a point. And he says, when a fire consumed them, it wasn't a punishment. It doesn't mean a literal fire came and punished them and, shot by fire. The spiritual fire consumed them. They went on this spiritual trip to the point they couldn't come back. They had this sort of, they expired. They had this overwhelming spiritual experience that took them out of their bodies. And so they went too far in their spiritual journey, and there was no return from there. Literally, soul leaving their body. And so, and actually, there are commentaries that read this into the other ones. So, read this commentary as a sort of spiritual understanding of intoxication. They were intoxicated means they were intoxicated with the experience, not with alcohol. But whatever you're going to say, I think this is a very powerful idea that their initiative took them to places where they were overextending their spiritual journey at the expense of remaining tethered to the material world.
And I remember in one of Rabbi Lerman's classes, talking about the three types of people, and I'm sorry to remember the Sadak, the Benini, and whatever that low level is, that the idea of even at the highest level, we're not to ascend to heaven and stay there. It's our job to come back to terra firma and work to perfect the world. So you're saying that Aaron's sons, their enthusiasm, their spiritualism rose to the heights, and they chose to stay there rather than coming back and work on perfecting the world?
Yeah. Whether a conscious choice or they just went too far, that it was pointing no return. Their soldiers like had this experience that overwhelmed them. And in a sense, if you look at the contrast in Aaron and his sons, there's a couple ways you can slice it. Either you look at, Aaron recognized that there's a time and place for initiative and time and place for sort of following orders. When it comes to the priesthood, that's when there's a regimented way we should be serving God. When it came to the prophet, to Moses, then it was kind of, let's look for innovation. Let's look for ways of finding space for deeper worship. And so they overextended the boundaries in the wrong place. But there's also, I think, maybe the way I look at it is they took example from their father and took it too far. And it's a cautionary tale where we have Aaron telling us one thing, an important thing of taking initiative, of being confident in your own self when it comes to a mission from God, of taking going with something, but there's a caution to that. The sort of pushback to that is even that has its limits, right? Even that has its guardrails. Otherwise, it could be detrimental. And so going back why Aaron had got a second chance at the golden calf, I don't know for sure, but I think it could be the golden calf was a mistake Aaron made, calculated mistake almost, right? And it wasn't. It was in his sort of journey of spiritual journey or whatever's going on in Jewish people. Then they made this mistake, but it didn't lead him to uh, overextend. If anything, it took initiative in a place where I took God where it shouldn't go. It's the calf. What they were doing is they were taking themselves to places where they shouldn't go, right? So they were extending themselves into spiritual domains that were above their capacity.
Excuse me.
And
I'm sorry. With this mission for Aaron almost feels like an opportunity for him to do tshuva for the golden calf. That as we make mistakes in life, we still can do tshuva and move forward.
yeah,
Just what I was
absolutely.
going to ask. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it was a sign, the fact that he was chosen for this and able to do this, was a sign that his teshuvah was accepted. And not just for himself, but he was representing the people. And so the worship in the temple in a certain way, remember, they're bringing a calf as an offering, the same exact calf, golden calf. And so that was sort of that was a symbol of teshuvah, that the Jewish people's teshuvah as a whole was accepted. Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at this, I think in our own lives, bring this back home, we have this, I think, tension between these ideas. On the one hand, we're told take initiative, right? Go ahead and don't be too cautious. Moses told Aaron, don't be overcautious. You have this position, you have this role, go for it, grab the bull by its horns, and take it home. On the other hand, there's this caution from his children that took this initiative and led them to very tragic end. So where do we draw the line? How do we know when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate? How do we know? So there's a few ways you can slice this, and I like to think of it that there's a framework that we're given. In Judaism, it's the Torah framework. Aaron was given the framework of temple worship, and within that framework, we're invited to extend ourselves as much as we can, take initiative, go places, be confident in what we're doing. We're co-creators with God. Don't shy away from our role. Don't be afraid to be that Jew, right? And be proud and loud, and but within the framework. As soon as we step out of the framework, we could almost stop worshiping God and worshiping ourselves, right? As soon as we make it about what's meaningful to me and ignore some sort of framework, or what that framework is, we can discuss, where the boundaries are or not. But as soon as you say there's no framework really, and I'm going to go to places that to me feel right. That's when we begin to be in places and go beyond where we're supposed to in places that can be dangerous for us, dangerous to the world. Another way of looking at it is, I think, is a very important point in Judaism is what is our role? We're supposed to be
As
a moral,
an individual or as a
both,
community.
both. We have this sort of moral duty to ourselves and to the world, to live a moral life, to also be a bastion of morality for the world, light to the nations. We also have a spiritual role, right? Which is to introduce a divine consciousness, to live higher, to transcend a little bit. And these two are often in a tension with each other. Transcendence means I'm kind of stepping away from materialism, stepping away from engaging in the world that is around me, right? It's so mundane to get involved in commerce and finance. And it's like this is life, this is meaningful, this is so petty. If from a spiritual perspective, I could be spending my time, really involved in meditating and understanding the secrets of the universe and really, getting deep in my own journey. On the other hand, when I do that, I'm removing myself from any uh, engagement with real world stuff. And this Judaism has these two poles to it, right? The two tablets almost. You have worshiping God and Shabbat, which is all about transcendence. You have don't kill, don't steal, be honest, don't be jealous. And we spoke about this, how the two have to go hand in hand. And we have to have the transcendence because otherwise we get very stuck in materialism and we're no better. We don't have a message for the world. If you're just part of the world, you're just going through the motions of everyone else. What message do you bring them? You're part of it. So we have to have transcendence, which allows us to then come back into the engagement of the world with a message, with a vision, with something meaningful. And that's why we have every week Shabbat and then with the days of the week. We have to have both. If you have the whole week Shabbat, you're ignoring your own purpose. You may as well not be here. What purpose do you serve the world? 7 days a week of work, though, you become part of the rat race, and you never have a frame of reference outside of the world with which to engage, to teach, to guide, to inspire. And we have Shabbat, which we step back. 6 days we work. Both are needed in this constant give and take. And that is sort of the messaging, I think, on one level of what Aaron and his children. Aaron was saying, he was nervous about this, and Moses said, "You got this." But his children said, "We're gonna go all the way. Let's just engage in this spiritual journey and let's like go there." And the mistake was that's not how we're supposed to live. So
And God created the lower realm as much as He created the upper realm. So to abandon the lower realm in a way is abandoning part of God's mission.
yeah, yeah.
But how do
So
you,
Aaron made yeah.
sorry, but like when you say that about like, well, we're not, we can't do Shabbat 7 days a week, but then how do you, and that this is not to be judgmental or pejorative in any sense, but my mind went to kind of like the ultra Orthodox communities that spend like every day Talmud, learning all day, like no time for anything else. How do you kind of reconcile that instinct with what you're talking about?
Question. I think there's a few things that are relevant there. First of all, it's a pretty new phenomenon, right? The idea of mass scale people spending years and years in study as opposed to working. Go through the Talmud. Talmudic sages all had jobs and made a living, and were engaged somewhere in the world. And I think there's a few things. Number one is, for example, in Chabad, that's not the practice for this reason. Um, there's a world out there we have to engage with. And in Chabad, they practice for a year or two after marriage, usually. People study in Kollel, so get a foundation, even once you're living a real world married, and then either go out, get a job, whatever you're going to do, go out in the world. So there is this, in our community, personally, this notion that yes, our goal is not to be sitting in a Beit Midrash all day and studying. That's not our role in the world. The flip side is that there has to be some people doing that, right? You need rabbis, you need guides. If
Right.
everyone was going out and getting jobs, who's going to continue this developing Torah? Who's going to be the guides to all of us to share with us wisdom that's continuing to evolve? Now, the question is balance, right? How many people you need engaged in this, sort of almost like you have in the secular world, right? There's professors and faculty of colleges that we need academia, some people who are going to spend their lives uh, studying and developing ideas, some ideas which remain just in the world of ideas, some which have real practical ramification in science and technology and anthropology, whatever it's going to be. And so the same thing, the Jewish world, we need our academics, our people that are going to be engaging in Torah study, engaging in developing the ideas of Torah further and preserving them. So there, and I think where this started was post-Holocaust, where there was a real fear almost that the rabbis, most of the rabbis are dead, and what's going to preserve, and became this movement of people being supported to study and let's preserve Judaism. And it now just grew and became at a scale where that's the debate now, I guess, of is it sustainable and is it the right thing to do? But I do think that it has to be an end goal that engaging with the world, whether it's engaging the world in business and commerce or even becoming a rabbi where you're engaging in community with real world things, right? Wherever you're going to use your talents, but I think there has to be a real engagement with the world as part of the person's life mission. And having a mission to spend your whole life sitting and studying, I think is noble in a certain respect, but it is not living up to your fullest mission here. The metaphor the Rebbe once gave is there's a fire burning in a home. So you need people, who are studying and who are training, whatever. When a fire is burning, you whatever you're doing, you drop it and you go and engage with it. You go and jump into that building. So could you train more? Could you be more developed? Yes, but there's a world out there that needs our help, needs our engagement, and that's our role. So again, every community has to deal with its own issues, and I'm not going to comment on other communities. And I think there's merit to it somewhat, but I do agree with you that ultimately I think our role is not to be sitting in the study hall for our lives, but to maybe for a chunk of time to build the knowledge, to build with the spiritual foundation, then use that into implementing, into going out there. And maybe to a certain degree, yeah, that is mirroring the mistake of Aaron's sons, right? This is so beautiful. This is so incredible that I want to just stay there. And that's not the job. The job is to have that momentary experience, then come back and translate it, implement it.
Not Aaron's son, but thinking about Moses, who wasn't selected to be the priest, big job, who wasn't permitted to cross over into Israel, the promised land, who was buried in a place that nobody knows where, so that it's a mystery, it remains. And I'm thinking about Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, perhaps the most important Jew. I don't know how you rate it, but certainly it's Moses. We all know what that means. And poor guy didn't get to be the priest, didn't get to go to Israel. But it also says to me that there must be a lesson that we're supposed to take from that.
Good point. Yeah, I actually we have a class in it. The contrast of Aaron and Moses is very interesting. The roles they served and sort of the way their lives shaped out is an interesting thing. Definitely lessons there. But it's a conversation of its own. Yeah. All right. This is wonderful. Thank you all for joining on this journey.
Wonderful, and you were always so inspiring and caused so much thought.
Right.
Terrific.
Right. And things are
And
so
we'll be back next week.
beautifully put.
Yeah. Have a good trip.
Yes.
Rabbi, gay gesund hate and kum gesund hate.
Right.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Best of health to your mom.
Thank you very, very much.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Have a good night.
Night.